Now I lost her. Okay. Well, there she is. Okay.
Here we are. Good evening, everyone. Hello, my name is Lila. I'm the events manager at Porter Square Books, and I want to thank you all for choosing to log in and spend some time with us this evening, especially because I know we're running a few minutes late. So we're so grateful to have you here, as well as tonight's very special guests, Ken Kwapis and Amber Tamblyn. If you don't know us already, Porter Square Books is an independent and employee-owned bookstore in Cambridge, Mass., located on the traditional and unceded land of the Wampanoag people. The world gets a little bit weirder every day, but we are still here chugging away, getting you the books you need. If you're local, we have a safe in-store browsing experience. We also do curbside pickup, local delivery, and have tons of shipping options if you're not local. So do check us out at portersquarebooks.com. You'll be hearing this from us and many of your other favorite bookstores and independent shops this season. But if you love us and want to support us during these weird pandemic times, there's one really easy way to do that, and that is just do your holiday shopping early. We're calling October the new December, and you can save your bookstore by just moving up that holiday shopping by a month or so, whether it's online or in person. So that's my little soapbox moment there. And I hope you all will stay connected with us by tuning into future virtual events. We have some really great ones coming up, including tomorrow night on Saturday at 8 p.m. You can hang out with us and some other booksellers from across the country virtually for Born to Read Booksellers Talk Bruce Springsteen. That'll be really fun. Or on next week, Wednesday, we have a ticketed event with the Natalie Portman for Natalie Portman's Fables. And your ticket includes a copy of the book, and it just might be signed. So we have a ton of other great events coming up. Stay tuned by checking out our website or subscribing to our events newsletter, and hopefully we'll see you again. And now just a few housekeeping notes, and then I promise we are going to get to the good stuff. So this event is recorded, so you can watch it back. You can only stay for part of the talk, or if you want to share it with a friend, it'll be right here at this same link for you. It's also live streaming to YouTube right now, and so you can share that YouTube window. We've got this lovely chat box that many of you have discovered on the bottom right of your screen. It says, say something nice. So please do, and you can type in there and say hi, or maybe tell us where you're watching from. Of course, we do expect you to keep it respectful, and we reserve the right to kick out anybody who is not maintaining that standard. Right next to that little chat box down at the bottom of your screen, you can see the words ask a question, and you can type in there or in the chat box any questions that you have for Ken or Amber, and we will have some time towards the end of the event to look at those. This is also live streaming to YouTube, as I mentioned, so if you are watching on YouTube, you can't comment, you can't ask questions. It's a little bit of a limited experience, so come join us on Crowdcast, and you can actually participate. The link is right in the video description. I'd like to finally call your attention to this very good-looking green button, sort of in the middle bottom of your screen. And it says order, but what I really want to do is direct from Porter Square Books, and that is indeed where you can purchase your copy or copies right from our website. And Ken was kind enough to send us some book plates for you all, so you can even get a signed copy. Okay, I promise, again, this is most of my spiel. I'm going to get off your screen soon. Tonight, we're so pleased to welcome Ken Kwapis for his new book, But What I Really Want to Do Is Direct, joined by Amber Tamblyn. Library Journal described this book as offering lessons of filmmaking, what counts as success in Hollywood, and the magic of film. And Entertainment Weekly called it the crash course film school book people need when they may not be able to get back to film school. He's got the endorsements of such talented people as Jenna Fisher, Bryan Cranston, Tig Notaro, and of course, the very smart Amber Tamblyn. Ken Kwapis is an award-winning director who has moved easily between the worlds of feature filmmaking and television directing. He's directed more than 10 feature films and helped launch 7 television series, including NBC's The Office. Amber Tamblyn is an Emmy and Golden Globe nominated actress, writer, director, and the author of 6 books, including the critically acclaimed Era of Ignition, Coming of Age in a Time of Rage and Revolution. She's a contributing writer for the New York Times, poet in residence at Amy Poehler's Smart Girls, poetry reviewer for Bust Magazine, and a founding member of the Time's Up organization. She's also joining us by car right now. It's been a whole journey. It's pretty cool. So Ken and Amber, we're so thrilled to have you here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lila.
Thank you so much. You guys, I made it to my desk.
Where are you? Where?
I am on the moon, Ken Kwapis.
Okay.
I'm in Toronto. I'm shooting a TV show here.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're out of the car.
I
And
am. It was going to be very dramatic, but
and I'm thrilled to be. I'm thrilled that Porter Square invited us. So thank you, Porter Square.
yes,
Uh,
thank you.
and I think I'm going to lead off and read something from this book. Um, this is a little section actually that's about Amber and myself and our experience making the film The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. And the chapter is in among other things, it's about rehearsal and how to structure a rehearsal, how to come up with, how to create a productive rehearsal period, especially when, as is usually the case, you have no time. And that was the case with Sisterhood. I think we had 2 or 3 days to rehearse. But anyways, let me
Yes.
just jump. I'm just going to read this, and it begins like so. With a less than luxurious rehearsal period and no access to actual locations, it's mostly impractical to block scenes. More important is to give actors a chance to build bonds and develop a shorthand. I feel actors need to spend as much time together as possible, especially if they're playing characters with established relationships, longtime friends, for example. The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants tells the story of 4 lifelong friends born days apart, now 16 years old. The actors, Blake Lively, Amber Tamblyn, Alexis Bledel, and America Ferrara, were new to each other. We had but a few rehearsal days to create the illusion of a tight, unshakable foursome. To quickly form that camaraderie, I designed a couple of exercises. First, I sent them on a shopping expedition to a local thrift store. I instructed each actor to purchase an article of clothing in character. Now, this wasn't a random assignment. There's a pivotal scene in Sisterhood that takes place in a thrift store. It's the scene where the characters discover the eponymous pants. Each actor had a budget of $75. It was a while ago. And I told the quartet not to be shy about proffering opinions of their fellow cast members' fashion instincts, in character, of course. Debating how a dress looks on your best friend, defending your own style choices, cajoling a pal into making a bold purchase, the exercise quickly established the dynamic within the group. In addition to shopping, I gave Blake, Amber, Alexis, and America a writing assignment. In the film, the 4 friends go their separate ways for the summer, but not before marking the occasion by inaugurating the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. I instructed the cast to create a document, the Constitution of the Traveling Pants, a set of bylaws governing the actions of the Sisterhood. This document was not part of the story, but I knew that writing it would enrich the way the cast played the inauguration scene. It would be a set of precepts, behavioral guidelines for the sisters during their summer apart. I left the foursome alone to create their code of conduct, and they attacked the task with zeal. A bit too much zeal, it turns out. When I returned an hour or so later, the cast had not only finished the document, but managed to rewrite all the dialogue in the scene as well. I urged them, I urged them to trust the original words, but the key takeaway was that the scene now belonged to them. The exercise was a success. The 4 actors now had a shared history. And one of the reasons I wanted to read that is I talk a lot with young directors about how to deal with rehearsal time when you have none. And one of the key points in this is that I wasn't there for either of those exercises. Those were exercises that you guys did on your own, and I'm proud of how creative it turned out. So
I agree. And every time I think about that experience working with you, Ken, I sort of look back at that as a directorial litmus test for all of the good and bad directing that I have experienced in my 25-year career. You, of course, being sort of the beacon in many different ways of someone great to work with. And I mean that it's not a coincidence that all 4 of us, that Blake and America and Alexis, the 4 of us are still such close friends, but that we also love you so much and we
Yeah.
cherish you and we would work with you again in a heartbeat. And that had so much to do with the strength and the bond that you created on the set. And the fact that you could make rehearsals fun like that. You tricked us. And I feel like that's to a degree a mark of a really strong director. When you
Trickery.
make it trickery, right? When you make it fun for each other. You know, there was a memory I wanted to share, and then I want to jump in and talk to you a little bit about this wonderful book that you've written that I just think, not only do I think everyone should buy it because, you know, I want to, you know, support you and certainly support independent bookstores. But I think also just as a way to, it's a coming of age story about you as an artist, and how you came to be the director that you are, but have the perspective that you have, when it comes to combining drama and comedy, which is part of your brilliance. It's part of what makes you who you are and so special. And you're able to get that out of people without them even knowing, out of actors. And that's sometimes really hard to do because actors are only thinking always about themselves in the space of the screen and on a set, and how they're being perceived and what they're doing and what does one little eye movement mean and all of those things. And you as a director were really able to help those things go away. I'll tell a short story, which is there was this one night after we did this sort of sisterhood circle, where we climbed down this fire escape ladder, and the shot was we were walking down an alleyway, and there was a guy up a couple stories up with holding a bucket of water. I think he was pissed that we were shooting in the alley outside of his building, and everyone was like making a thing out of it, and we were a little freaked out, and we didn't want to walk down this alley at night. And I remember, Ken, you came and you walked up from the behind the camera where you were, and walked up and you said, "Hey, I'm going to show you, you're fine. Nothing's going to happen." And you came and you stood directly under where he had the bucket. And you stood there for a good period of time. And there was the four of us we were young too. So we were like huddled there, and you stood there and the guy moved the bucket away. And then we shot this scene, and it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it did many things at once. First of all, it helped us feel protected by you, which as young women on a set is not a thing we always get to experience in the entertainment business, and certainly back then. It made us realize that we were sort of manifesting this fear, especially four girls that were riling each other up, and you were saying, "Look, I got you, and it's going to be fine, and there's going to be no bucket of water splashed on your head." And I remember you stood there and you didn't even look up at him. You just stared at us. You just stared straight forward, almost daring him to do it. Like, "I fucking dare you." And it set a confidence. And so I just wanted to share that memory. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I'm wondering, God, what was in that bucket? I mean, what? But two things occur to me. One is that, I feel like I'm going to come back to this. I just want to tease this idea a little bit. I feel like 90% of my job is to create an atmosphere where people do feel acknowledged and safe and able to play and to be and to make fools of themselves and to crawl out on a limb. And so, I mean, I think that's something I had to figure out on the job over many years. But the other thing I want to go back to just briefly is comedy and drama, because weirdly enough, I don't think of myself as either a comedy or a drama director, and I do have here's how I approach everything. If I have a piece of material that's comedic, I look for ways to ground it in reality. And if I'm handed a dramatic piece of material, I look for the humor to leaven the drama, and there's always humor hiding in the drama. I wish more directors thought that way about dramatic scenes, that there's always humor hiding even in the most dire situations. So I feel like even though I've done a lot of things that are obviously thought of as comedic, I don't really think of myself in that way. But I'm glad you shared that story. God, I must have been, I was crazy.
Well, I think you were also wrangling for 20-year-old girls. I mean, you were like, and we by that point we had become friends. So, I mean, Jesus, take the wheel. It was like getting us under control on set sometimes to like stop playing around.
Well, but the other thing that's important, and for people attending this reading, this Q&A, who know the film, there's actually not a lot of scenes in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants with all the 4 characters together. So that's why it was even more important to figure out how to create this sense of camaraderie, because there's not, the 4 of you as a group actually don't have a lot of real estate in the film. So I remember that but that, happily, it didn't take much for the 4 of you to not only, find a way to find a bond, but sort of, you found a great energy, the 4 of you. So it's but anyways, yeah, maybe I'll try that bit again, get someone.
You're gonna try see if it works. You mentioned, you mentioned the word playing, and I think that's really true of your work. You're one of the most curious directors I've ever worked with, and that is a testament to you, because I think most directors get stuck in the, what I call the sort of painting by numbers of it, thinking of the necessary of getting the wide and the medium and the close-ups and the traditional shots that you get as a director. And you do that, but you also play, and you make actors feel comfortable in their ability to play. And you talk about that in this book, not just with Sisterhood, but with The Office, and with so many different things that you've directed over the years. And I want, just for anyone here, any aspiring directors that are watching this tonight or are curious about that, tell us a little bit about that idea, about playing, about having fun, in the moment when you're trying to get something out of somebody, but you're not trying to be the director about it. Right. And why that's important to directing when you're with actors.
Well, part of what I've tried to do, and I'm going to also, I want to describe how I started too, but I'm going to tell you about where I am now. And part of what I try and do is not look at the scene as like the be all and end all of everything, or any film or show that I'm working on is like the be all and end all of anything. It's like you and I are working on a scene. We have a given amount of time. We have some words. There's some action. What can we do? How can we explore? What can we find? Okay, let's move on. Let's do it with another scene. There's never a point where I would say, Amber, that's it. That's the keeper. That's the take. Because that's not the point. The point is simply to explore. There's no end. There's no outcome that's necessary. And I think that for aspiring directors, it really is helpful if an actor is stuck, say, on a line of dialogue. It just doesn't feel like it's coming out right, is to not worry about a line. A line isn't the point. A line is a line of dialogue. The point is to back up and approach the scene with the actor. Let's talk about what the character is driving, what the character wants and needs, and can I, as a director, give that actor some useful tactics to achieve that end. The line will take care of itself. The line is unimportant. So I think that those are just a couple of ways in which I try to keep everyone processed. Well, let's put it this way: keep everyone focused on process as opposed to outcome. I mean, but I didn't start that way at all. In fact, I when I started as a professional director, I really didn't know how to talk to actors and had never taken an acting class, to be honest, and realized very quickly that there was this giant gap in my film school education that I had to fill on my own. And I would say at the beginning, like a lot of young directors, I mean, what I mostly wanted to do was have control. And what control in my mind meant, okay, Amber, I need you to stand right here, because if you're here, it's going to make for a cool composition.
Yeah.
And so I think that what I quickly discovered is that if the actor stood there as I asked, yes, the composition would be pretty cool, but it might be lifeless. So the part of it was, okay, well, maybe the thing to do is to not lose sight of your ability to pre-visualize things, but kind of strike a better balance when, it's as much about just sort of how do you put something that's alive on in front of the camera as it is how do you compose and choreograph elements. So, but that, again, it took a while to figure out, and I would say over the years before you and I worked together, I certainly gave some of the most confounding notes that actors have ever heard. So it took a while to figure it out.
I bet.
Oh man.
Yeah, you said earlier the point is to explore, and I love that. And if I could put that, as someone who's directed, I've only directed one feature film, but as someone who also is a director and loves the experience of that so much and learns so much from you, from watching you, from listening to you, I feel like that should be the slogan that everybody should put on their, their table, their writing desk, whatever. The point is to explore. And I think so much of the time, making art like this is such a scary experience. No matter how probably you still feel that way, and you're a veteran director. You've done so much, but it should always sort of feel it should feel scary in that way, and it should feel like that's part of the explorative experience, and part of why I said that you're such a curious director, because you're always curious to see what's going to happen in the moment, while also knowing what you ultimately hope is going to come out of that, what's going to fit into the greater picture of what you're trying to make. And that is quite the balance.
Well, I'm going to jump in and say, yes, I'm still a nervous wreck. That's fine. But I panic sometimes, but that's different but that's the kind of good creative panic. That's different than being, say, a panic merchant who creates panic on a set. So I do think
you don't direct from that fear, and that I know. You might be panicked, and it might be on the inside, and maybe it manifests in different ways, but that is a huge difference between being fearful on the inside and directing through fear, and you're not the latter.
I mean, I definitely, it's nerve-wracking, but I also feel like one of the things I have come to believe when directing a scene is that you don't really know the scene until you shoot it.
That's right.
And so in a way, that's kind of a liberating feeling. You don't have to know. You're going to find it. And you may not know even once you've shot it. It may be like 2 weeks later, oh, that's what that scene was about. Which is fine. But for me, that when you said explore, I mean, the other big thing for me, and this is kind of like the main theme of the book for me, is that I feel like the way I sort of measure success in my work is really how much from project to project I can improve I'll call it the process, or I'll call it the exploration process. So there's a lot, it's like I can't control the outcome of we can't control the outcome of what we do. It's like you make a beautiful film, and then who knows if anyone's going to buy a ticket? Who knows what critics say? All you can control is the process of making the thing, and so for me, like making that exploration better each time out that's my personal yardstick. So.
Well, will you talk a little bit more about that? Because I think I want people to also understand the highs and the lows of this business. I feel like people know a lot about that from an actor standpoint, because those are the interviews we traditionally see out there in magazines and all that. But, you chronicle in the book a lot of, heartbreaks of things that didn't work out or failed, or you thought were going to be amazing and they weren't. And then also things that changed the trajectory of your entire career with their success, having no idea that was what it was going to be. So will you talk a little bit about that as a director and how you've sort of dealt with that? Because I'm sure there are people here too who, whether they want to direct or have directed, and they always say that it's something like 85% of directors never direct a second film, statistically. And there's a reason, because it's tough and it's scary. Yeah, it's 85%. Maybe it's changed now, but Just talk a little bit about the ups and the downs and how you, especially when things were down, how you would say, you know what, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna get in there and I'm gonna do it again.
Well, I do think that part of what I've tried to do over the years is just not let the business define my worth. And a lot of people might say, well, but yeah, it's business. I mean, a $42 million opening weekend is better than a $2 million opening weekend. And my feeling is fine, but if you're going to let numbers really define your worth, then you are nothing but a commodity with a fluctuating market value. And so I feel like, again, part of what I keep, and I'm still struggling, but part of what I try and do is, if I'm more focused on process, it allows me to weather all kinds of setbacks, a terrible review, a project that goes off the rails, so I feel like, again, it's part of my project in writing the book is to sort of express that, is to say, it's not simply a matter of, yes, you have to develop tenacity, you have to develop resilience, and you have to have faith in the process too. But all of it comes down to, don't let somebody else tell you what you're worth.
I love that. For anyone here, we're talking to Ken Kwapis again. If there's anyone that came in a little bit late besides me, we're talking to the amazing director Ken Kwapis about his book. But what I really want to do is direct. It's on St. Martin Press, and I highly encourage all of you to order from Porter Square Books, specifically support independent bookstores. Please do not order your books from Amazon. Please support independent bookstores. This is a big, big, important message. Even if it just takes you a couple extra clicks. I know it's not as easy as some of the other ways to order books, but do it. It's worth it. We love our bookstores. So also with that in mind, Ken, talking a little bit more about the instinct, your instinct as a director, which I sort of discussed at the beginning, how you had this instinct that was able to hone an actor's craft, but also make them feel really comfortable. And can you talk a little bit, like, in the moment? I think this is something that isn't discussed enough, again, especially for young directors, if there's anyone here that's starting out or is just interested. But has there ever been a moment in which you were running out of time, you were running out of daylight, you weren't sure, based on the way the actors were feeling, based on any circumstances in which you had to make kind of a quick decision that was either totally beneficial for the film that you found later, maybe in post while you were editing it? Or how do you come to those types of decisions in the moment when you are pushed up against time, when you're stressed, when you've got a crew that's at the end of the day? Talk a little bit about those really stressful moments as a director.
Well, I would say 9 times out of 10, when my back's against the wall, it's against the wall because I'm digging my heels in about an idea, as opposed to loosening up a little bit. And I think that, invariably, if I can, like, step in the moment, if I'm like, if everything is falling apart, if I can just step back and figure out what's actually important in the scene, what I usually discover is, okay, you know what, that dolly shot that might be really beautiful is actually not key to the scene at all.
Yeah.
Or in fact, it's more important to focus on one element or another at a given point. So I would say most of the time, again, you have to, again, I would say step back, even in the middle of, like, everybody getting on your case to move forward, move faster. Step back to try and remind yourself what's important in the scene. Now, the other thing I would say to all young directors or all aspiring directors, this is not a small thing. I really encourage you, when you're on the set, to stand next to the camera.
Yeah.
And for many reasons. But the most important is that you are close to your cast. Now, obviously, every shot, every scene is different. If you're doing some kind of complicated thing where you can't really be physically in proximity to the camera, yes, of course you can't do that. But if you're doing a scene, let's say a character-driven scene with a number of characters, and there's not a lot of choreography, for instance, why would you not want to be right next to your cast? Because what
Mhm.
happens is you call the word cut, they look up, your face should be the first one they see.
Mm.
But I would say most of the time in this modern era, directors sit at a monitor and not always close to the camera at all. So the director calls cut from 25 yards away. The cast wait. There's a conference that's going on at Video Village where the director's surrounded by people who.
And by the way, let me just interrupt to say the first thing a person does as an actor is it's like a child to their parent. You kind of, whether or not you want to do it, when it's cut, you look to the director. You're curious to know what the director thought. It's just it's a non-communicated understanding that you want to look them in the eye. So continue.
Yeah, but also I'm sure you've had this experience, Amber, where you call cut, the director's not there, so you have to find somebody to ask how to go. So
Yeah,
you
that's so true.
And it's like, how do we do? It's like, well, the camera operators, that's not necessarily their job.
Yeah.
But what happens is that, meanwhile, there's a sort of a, kind of a conversation, that's a polite way of putting it, back near the monitors between the director and others, oftentimes producers, executives, etc. I think what a lot of directors, not just aspiring directors, a lot of directors fail to realize that if you're sitting at a monitor, the power center of the set is at a monitor.
Yeah.
If you're standing at the camera, that's where the power center of the set is. And if somebody has a note, it better be important enough to actually walk over to you standing at the camera. But the main thing is, even forget about after you call cut, during the take itself, if you and I are working on a scene, you're aware that I'm right there.
Yeah.
It's like, right. Again, it's just sort of, it makes, it makes everything a little more human. And what we were talking about earlier about what is it that you do to kind of create an atmosphere in which people feel loose and playful. Part of it is just being there with the cat, being there next to your actor. It's like, it seems so simple, but it's, and again, every situation is different. If you're doing something that's complicated technically, of course, I would be at a monitor too, just to kind of manage it. But why do you need to micromanage, a close up at a monitor when you can be with your cast? And the other thing, this is a small thing. So like if we're doing a scene and I'm at the camera, and let's say, so Amber, let's say you're on camera, but let's say it's a shot where another character is just off camera. I can peripherally keep tabs on what the off camera actor is doing, which may give us an idea. Oh, you know what? We should do that on camera when we get to a new shot. So, there's a lot that you see peripherally when you're there next with the cast. So for younger aspiring directors, I just think, don't get stuck in a chair all day.
Don't get stuck in a chair all day. God, we got to make you some bumper stickers. Another thing that that is interesting that I don't think I've worked with any other director that did this, but you don't say action. When you start a scene, you don't say action. And I don't think you know this, but when I directed my film Paint It Black, the first day on set, and I was a nervous wreck, and the very first shot, I said, and okay, let's go. And I tried it because I loved that, and I didn't like it at all, but it didn't work for me. But the fact is that I tried it because and also that's the beauty of directing. Like, that's your style. It didn't work for me, but it influenced me. And tell me a little bit about your thoughts about the word action at the beginning of a scene and where that came from.
Here's the origin of why I normally just say, go ahead at the beginning of the shot.
Go ahead. That's it.
In the early 90s, I directed the pilot of the show, The Larry Sanders Show. And Gary Shandling had a lot of very innovative ideas about how the show should be shot, including, he took me aside and said, can you come up with a shooting style where the actors actually don't know whether the camera's on or off? So, to be honest, I couldn't. It was, we were shooting, among other things, we were shooting in 16 millimeter.
Right.
And you had to reload film magazines. And so I finally the best I could come up with, and Gary was happy with it. I said, Gary, what I'm going to do is once we're all together, I'll give a head nod to the camera operators to start their cameras. There won't be any of the usual commands, sound, rolling, speed, and all that. they'll just roll, and then I'll just turn to you, Gary, and say, go ahead, and then you can do whatever you want. So often Gary would, especially if he had the opening line in the scene, he would just start chatting with the cast, and then suddenly in the middle of just some chit chat, he'd just launch into the first line of his scene. So there was this kind of, there was no different, there was like the line between scene and not scene was completely
Right.
blurred. And it kind of, again, it really, I think, helped inform the performance, style of that show in a big way. And then after that, I just kept it with me, and I haven't said action for, oh gosh, 25 years, I guess. I can't do the math. But I do feel like what it does, though, is it sort of disarms people, and it's a sort of a reminder that, again, I'm sure you've been directed by plenty of people who, bark at, like action, like some very quiet, sensitive scene, action.
Yeah.
And
it's a very like masculine declaration too, of saying like,
it's like, I
decide.
you act, I tell you when. And
exactly.
so to me, it's like the main thing is, how do you just erase, forget about acting, just sort of let's all just be present, and oh yeah, let's do a scene too. So like it's sort of a way of kind of creating a kind of blurring of what's going on when the camera's on and what's going on when it's off. So
yeah.
Hey,
Just a reminder real quick too. I was just going to say this, but Porter Square Books beat me to it. If you guys have any questions, please put them down in the comments, and I'll ask a few questions to Ken, if it's about directing, if it's about something, the art of directing, the experience of it, the craft of it, or if there is a particular show you want to know about, whatever that is, we are open to those questions. I want to talk to you just a little bit about the writing process of this book. How long did it take you to write this book in total? And were there any parts of it that were difficult? Did you get stuck? Did it take years? Did it take 1 year? What was it like? Because you wrote about your whole life, basically, as an artist in this book.
It's funny because what prompted me to start writing, I've been an advisor at the Sundance Directors Lab for 3 years. And I found that I really loved working with up and coming directors. And one of the things I realized is a lot of the questions that they were asking me, certainly there were plenty of craft questions. How do you revisualize? How do you analyze a scene? But there were so many questions about simply, how do you comport yourself as a director? How do you carry yourself? How do you develop resilience? That very question you asked. Those are the things I feel are not taught to, in film school. So that's what prompted me to start jotting things down. I had no intention of writing a book at the beginning. I was even afraid to say out loud, I'm writing a book. I just sort of started jotting. But I finally felt like I wanted to sort of make it as personal as possible. So it sort of started to take on the quality of a memoir. And again, for me, all I tried to do was to not worry. This is right out of the book, but not worry about the outcome, not worry if anyone ever read it. All I wanted to do is be as candid and personal with it as possible and get it on the page. And it slowly started to take on a good shape. So.
How long in total did it take to write it? Just out of curiosity.
2 years, I'd say.
2 years.
2 years, yeah. And yeah, I would say a little over, not much over.
And was it something that you had been thinking about writing before, or what was the seed that was planted that gave you the idea?
It's funny because I love the idea of film. I love films that are autobiographical, that are also kind of play around with the format of storytelling. I'll just mention one very quickly. And if you haven't seen it, I hope you may have seen this, but I love Agnes Varda's films so much. And I love her film, The Beaches of Agnes, which is...
I've never seen that.
Oh, it's super cool. It's like mainly...
I'm writing it down. Continue.
It's like mainly autobiographical, but it's this whirligig of a film, so that it's sort of part essay, part autobiography, part. So I love the idea of, again, a book that sort of had I don't want to say free form. That sounds a little wrong, but sort of just a kind of not a straightforward approach to how to talk about the directing process. So so in turn, to be honest with you, I'm inspired. I would love to make a film as personal as this book. So it's like,
hey, maybe you adapt your own book about a young director trying to navigate the wilderness that is our insane industry.
Absolutely.
Was there anything that didn't make it into the book that, everyone knows a good director has to kill their darlings. And I wonder for you in the writing process, if there was something that ended up on the cutting room floor, as it were.
Think of a fun one. I wrote but discarded a chapter about post-production because I didn't think it was compelling enough, because the book really kind of follows the process from like getting a job, like how to take a meeting, all the way through dealing with like bad reviews. So it like covers the whole. But in post-production, I focused mainly on the fine art of giving people feedback and receiving feedback, and also a little bit about the research screening process, which is torturous. But I didn't really get a lot into editing, so I just wasn't happy with my my writing on that. But no, most of it's in there. I mean, it's not comprehensive by any means, but the in terms of looking at my own work. But yeah, no, nothing that I killed for a bad reason, though.
Right, fair enough. But just so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the questions, because we've got some really great questions in here. But since you left stuff out about post, I do think post is very interesting, and there's a lot of directors that would suggest that that's where the film is actually found. It's not actually found in the script. And I know for me in my process with Paint It Black, again, that was very much the case, that I found the movie that I had in my head for years in post when I was in the editing room. So will you talk a little bit about that? On a couple of your films, you've actually brought me in, if I had a meeting on the Warner Brothers lot and we were texting or something, you go, come on by, I'm editing, come see this thing. And I know you love it so much. So talk a little bit about that.
I do love it. Well, I mean, here's what I do write about. I do write about the process of inviting people into the cutting room. And I talk a lot about what I feel is productive feedback. So I'll just give you, and I have a rule of thumb about feedback in general. And that is, if like Amber, if you're making a film and you're in process, you've got a rough cut and you invite me in, I'll roll up my sleeves and we'll get into it.
Right.
Once that film is done, then the feedback's done. The only thing that's important at that point is to celebrate. The film is done. The film is, and that is all that matters. And I cannot tell you how many times where I've been to a premiere of my own film and a well-meaning person comes up and says, that second act still lags. It's like, what possible reason?
Yeah.
Would you bring that up now? And so I feel like that ground rule number one, once it's finished, once it's locked, it's only cause for celebration.
Yeah.
Nothing else, but I would say there's a lot of important, for instance, if you invited me in and there's a performance that's not working in your cut, like how helpful is it if I say, I don't know if you should have cast that person.
Right.
Like, oh boy, that's really helpful now. I can't undo that. That ship sailed a long time ago. So, better to sort of, as a person giving you feedback, is to sort of ask questions that kind of, that kind of remind you what your original impulses were with the character, because it's easy to forget. Like when you're in post, sometimes it's easy to forget what your original idea was when you were on the set with maybe a complicated actor who you didn't, get everything you wanted. So in a way, my feedback would be questions that might prompt you to remember your original instincts and then start to hunt through the footage for ways to kind of, again, serve your original instincts.
I love that. That's so great. Okay, I'm going to go here to a few questions. This one comes to, you've got some great questions here. This one comes from Benjamin Russell. Benjamin said, I was lucky enough to meet Carol Spinney shortly before his passing. Is that how you say his last name?
Carol Spinney. Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you had any memories of him that you wanted to share aside from what is already in the book.
Well, I'm going to say two things about Follow That Bird. Carol Spinney, who created the characters Big Bird and Oscar the Grouch. I'm super proud of that film. And here's just two things. I'm repeating a little, Benjamin, I'm repeating a tiny bit of what's in the book. But the first thing is, I feel like the message of that film, and it's a message movie, is more vital now than it was in 1985 when we made the film. I mean, the message, it's a movie about the importance of inclusion. And needless to say, we live in a time where politicians, actively, encourage people to distrust outsiders. And so I feel like the message of the movie is super relevant. The second thing is, this is going back to, talking about my journey as a director. When I first started directing that film, I really thought of Big Bird mainly as a wonderful exotic object to photograph, not even to direct, to photograph, like an 8-foot character. How do you compose? I mean, everything about it was about how could I come up with really compelling images with this bird in it. And it wasn't until I was, well along in shooting the film that I started to connect with Big Bird's emotional journey on a human level. And his story is so powerful. The story is, it's very much, I mean, he leaves Sesame Street because he's convinced he'll be happier with his own kind, only to realize that he misses the diversity that's on Sesame Street. So what I say in the book, and I'll repeat it, is I feel like once I connected with Bird on a human level, he became a subject as opposed to an object. And I feel like it took an 8-foot bird to teach me that, part of your job as a director is to figure out how to be a good student of human nature. So I love that question. Thank you. And I'm glad you got a chance to meet Carol.
Beautiful. This next question comes from Hannah Klepner, and Hannah asks, what do you like about directing for TV as opposed to feature films?
I actually like the speed. I like the fact that, it has to be done at times more quickly than features do. And I also like the fact that because if you're working on a series, for instance, and there's another story that's being done next week, there's less preciousness about it. For instance, like, on a feature film, there'll be a long discussion about whether or not this is the right coffee cup to use in the scene. But there's not enough time on a television schedule to have that discussion. So what it means in a positive way is if something doesn't work, there's a little bit of a sense of, don't worry, we've got another chance to try it out next week.
Right.
There's another one down the pike.
Right, exactly. And Porter Square Books is asking, what books inspired you to write this? That's a great question.
What books inspired me?
Like, did you read memoirs or any other, sorry, you go on.
No. I mean, I would say one of the things that I felt as a young person is that there weren't a lot of books by working directors. And there were certainly plenty of books about directors. And there were memoirs by legendary directors that in a way are not terribly helpful to a young, starting director. I will say, though, that I will single out just one memoir because it's just I just love it so much. And that's Louis Boone Wells' memoir, which is called My Last Sigh. And one of the great things about Boone Wells' memoir, and if you don't know Boone Well, he was, he's the great surrealist.
Brilliant. Yeah.
And but his book is also very much not about directing. It's about everything but directing. And one of the things I mean, there's a chapter about his favorite bars in Madrid. I mean, so I love
But that's interesting.
And it tells you a lot about him. And it actually, there's a great anecdote about Boone Well that relates to his memoir, and that is that when he worked, he had a rule that at lunch you couldn't talk about the project. You could talk about anything else, but you were forbidden to talk about the project that you're working on, the film you're shooting. So I think that tells you a lot about him. So
that's great.
Put that on the list.
This next question comes from some guy named Russ Tamblyn. Not familiar. Never heard of him. He's some, I guess, young up and coming actor. This young whippersnapper would like to know, who of the OG directors inspired you?
Of the OG?
Like original gangster, like the original great directors.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So the list is too long, but I'm just gonna, and I always use the same example, but he's hard to beat, and that's Ernst Lubitsch. And I would just say Ernst Lubitsch. Ernst Lubitsch is kind of one of the heroes. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on, but I would say that he's somebody who also figured out how to take comedic material and ground it in reality and take a dramatic moment and find the hidden humor in it. So,
right. That's great.
So
that's really great. This person wants to know, this is from Steph. Steph says, hi, Ken. So must be a friend of yours. What are some takeaways from the book for people who don't specifically work in TV and film? So maybe that's a little more about the personal side of it. And
sure. Well, there's also, I mean, I would say that, I mean, there's two answers to that. The first is anyone who is in any kind of managerial or leadership position, I think will benefit or at least enjoy like stories that I tell about trying to wrangle a sometimes unruly group of people, trying to get a lot of people with different agendas all on the same page. So in a way, the book is about developing leadership skills too. I mean, it's sort of, you know, and I obviously, as you can tell if you're listening to this, I try to lead by positive reinforcement. I try not to create chaos. I mean, I try to, you know, so that's one thing. And the second thing is, there are so many, you know, fields of endeavor that are like crazily competitive, not just art, not just entertainment. So I feel like for anyone who's entering a competitive arena, I think the book has a lot to say about, you know, just developing resilience and developing tenacity, you know, developing the skill to hang in there, and those are the two things I think will appeal to someone who has no interest in TV or film. So.
Right, fair enough. And we have one more question here. This is from Sarah Bro, and she wants to know, Ken and Amber, can you remember the first time you met for this first sisterhood movie?
Oh,
I'm trying to think. I
think we met. I want to say my gut tells me we met in Denise Denovi's office.
That sounds right, probably. Denise Denovi was the producer of Sisterhood.
One of the two producers of the film, and I can't say that I remember much more about the meeting. I remember many meetings after that more clearly, but I think that's probably what it was. And I don't remember. You know, I wish I could kind of eavesdrop on that meeting right now. It'd be kind of fun to see what we talked about. I'm sure I was nervous.
I'm sure I was nervous. I'm sure we were, you know, we had no idea what we were doing with the world.
You know, here's the funny thing is I remember very distinctly when my agent called me about Sisterhood and said, you know, Warner Brothers has this project they're interested in you considering. And I said, fantastic. What is it? And he said, it's a story about 4 girls who share a pair of pants. And I thought, oh my God, this is what my career has come to. 4 girls sharing a pair of pants. And then he added as if like as an enticement. But here's the thing, the pair of pants fits them all. And I
you're like, sold. I'm in.
All right, I'll read it. And then but then I read it and it was like, oh wow, this is like coming from such a different place. I was not familiar with the book series. I was unprepared for how emotionally, you know, honest the 4 characters set stories were, and I couldn't wait to get that job. So yeah, I think, but I'm guessing Denise's office.
That sounds. I think that rings some kind of a bell. I'm going to ask the last question here before we sign off, which is the question on everyone's mind, Ken Kwapis. Is there ever going to be a Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants 3?
Wow. Well, here's my answer, and then I may ask you the same question. My answer is I feel more optimistic now than I have in a long time that there will be. I may leave it at that.
Ditto.
Okay. What do you think, Amber Tamblyn?
Ditto.
Right.
This has been such a treat, such a joy. Everybody, please go order Ken's book. But what I really want to do is direct. Order it from Porter Square Books. And thank you so much for coming. And thank you so much for having me, Ken.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, this was so much fun, Amber. And thank you, Porter Square.
It's been so great. I really, I'm going to take away a lot from this, even as a lay book person, as I am. I loved that idea of, the directing, inspiring a writing project and then the writing, inspiring a directing project. And I think it really speaks to how inspiration is so fluid. And so I want to thank you both so much for joining us. And again, remind you all that you can get a signed copy of this book just by clicking on this green button right here. It's sort of in the middle of your screen. It says order, but what I really want to do is direct from Porter Square Books, and we will ship it to you, have it ready for pickup. We'll send it to you with love. Ken, Amber, thank you so much. This was such a fun way to spend Friday night. So thanks, everybody.
Bye, Ken. Good to see you.
Great to
Bye,
see you.
everyone.